Hi everyone, this is Tammy Ramsay, and on this episode of Get Leveled, we hear from married couple Greta and Clint Harmon on how to take our relationships to the next level. So this doesn't apply to just a romantic relationship. The tools that we learn from this episode can be applied to all of the relationships in our life, as well as the relationship that we have with ourselves. Hi Greta.
Hi Tammy.
I'm so happy that we're talking because I've been so inspired by watching you discuss your relationship very publicly in Dr. Shefali's Free to Be course. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So I work with, as you know, Dr. Shefali, who is Oprah's favorite parenting expert. And she has a new course that she's doing right now called Free to Be. And it's a course about relationships and finding freedom and liberation in relationships. All kinds of relationships, not just romantic relationships, but relationships with self, relationships with children, with siblings, with parents, with coworkers, and really just exploring what is the root of our relationship, quote unquote, failures, because she doesn't subscribe to any relationship being a failure. She says and teaches that all relationships are here to teach us and to be mirrors for us. And so Clint and I are really grateful to have this opportunity to bring our relationship and what we have gone through and what we are continuing to go through into the light, because our story, while probably not common to many, there are many pieces that are common in all relationships, and being able to share our process with that community and now with you is really a gift and an honor.
I had no idea it was going to be so moving. I've been thinking about it, like, why are we all learning so much from you? It's because we now live in an age of transparency where we're learning that all of these masks that we wear and all of the BS, they're just roadblocks, and it's like fakeness. And there is a level of artificiality in relationships that people just accept. And what you guys are doing is you're just stripping down and being totally raw and getting rid of all the masks, and you're being honest. How do you take your relationship to the next level?
Okay, so I think it's interesting what you said about, we're living in this age of transparency. And so I, for a long time, felt like that was how I was living my life, but I was completely delusional. And I was claiming to be authentic and claiming to be transparent, but I was more inauthentic with myself, and therefore like inauthentic in all of my relationships. So for us, for Clint and I, it was getting radically honest with ourselves first. We were in a very toxic relationship. We're a blended family. So I have two children from a previous marriage, and he has a son from a previous relationship whom I've been mom to since he was a year and a half old. And we blended our family sort of haphazardly, and we were very unconscious at the time. We had no idea what we were doing, and we just thought, oh my gosh, our kids are young. We're going to move to the beach. We're going to be all happy and joyful and sandy toes, and everything's going to be great. And it was like the complete opposite of that. So we were very toxic to the point where we had to separate physically our families. And we did that for a while, and we were kind of like in this honeymoon phase where we would get together on the weekends and all was great. And then it just kind of spiraled out of control to the point where I ended up moving from our home that we shared together to a brand new home, and I had to cut him off completely. And I remember the conversation we had standing in the garage. I had already moved my stuff out of our home. And I looked at him and I said, listen, we can never be together. This will never work for us as a couple and us as a family if we don't first go and work on ourselves and fill our own holes, make ourselves whole first. And then, maybe someday, I don't know. I even remember saying, I'm putting this out into the universe that, like, I feel like our paths are going to cross again someday, but we can't do it right now. And it was devastating to him. It was devastating
I
to
remember
me.
that.
Yeah,
I remember that day talking to you, and that stuck with me that you left it open.
I did. And I don't think I did that consciously. Like that conversation in the garage that day, the words, they came from a place of flow within my gut. I mean, it was just intuitive, but it wasn't something that I had pre-planned or pre-thought about. It was just a very in the moment, spontaneous conversation. And so we stayed legally married throughout this whole experience. And I literally cut him off. No communication. It was the first time in my life in pretty much any relationship that I set a very firm stone boundary. Like, you cannot contact me. You cannot come to my house. You cannot deliver flowers or sweet notes or anything. And I released him. And I really feel like that was the beginning of our leveling up in our relationship, not only with each other, but with ourselves, was the release, the full, complete release of the other. And then we had to go out into our own lives and really like fill our holes, figure out what was the root of our own issues that we were then bringing to the other in our relationship.
And I've got to watch you through this whole process.
I
And
know you've been such a great friend.
it's such an inspiring thing to watch the way that you're handling it and now getting these great tools and advice. There was definitely something real between you and Clint always. And, you know, these holes that everybody has were getting in the way. And so when we deal with our own stuff, we're better prepared to not get sucked into that hole of like lack and the stuff that comes between us. But I think what is important to note here is that a lot of people just have surface relationships. I think most people, when you really look around, people live on the surface. They just deal with the form of life and they go through the motions and check the boxes. And very few people get to the root of their pain and peek under the surface because of fear of maybe being uncomfortable. So
Oh, yeah. Well, we definitely had that.
So what does it mean to peek under the surface and get to the root? And why is that important to do in a relationship?
Okay, well, I mean, it means many things. For Clint, he had some unresolved childhood trauma that he never acknowledged, he had never spoken about. And it was a real source of pain that was driving the way that he built and formed his relationship. So he had like a fear of abandonment, a fear of not being loved. And for me, my process started with like, what is it? Looking in the mirror at myself and really acknowledging the fact that I was not a truth teller. I was a liar, not only to myself, but to everyone in my life. And by lie, I mean, I was an enabler. I was a codependent. I was a container. I'm a therapist by training. And so I sort of always took the avenue of, oh, I can fix anyone. I can fix your child. I can fix your relationship. I'm a fixer. And so all of that superseded and sort of was a mask to cover up fixing my own self. So when you ask, what does it mean to get to the root? It means working on yourself first. And it's exhaustive, right? We're always in a process of working on ourselves and healing. But for Clint and I, this was a really intensive journey to ourselves. And in order for us to do that, we had to get so honest with ourselves, which is painful. It was very painful for me to journal about, meditate, look in the mirror at myself in my own eyes and acknowledge that I was not telling the truth. And by not telling the truth, how could I ever be in a healthy relationship? So I think, and it looks different for everybody, but I think getting to peek under the surface of yourself through meditation, through journaling, through, embodiment exercises, whether you do yoga or work out or even just go for a walk, like really getting in tune with who you are and not being afraid to show up as that person. And until you do that and you have that whole relationship with yourself, there's no way you can show up and be authentic and whole in relationship with another person.
That is so true. And you say it as lying, which it is, we're conditioned in a society to be guarded, just to be private or to hold back and not say things, suppress emotions. But that can be considered polite, you know?
Yeah, but what it would look like in my relationship with Clint, he would come home from work in whatever mood he was in. Let's say that he was in a bad mood, he had had a bad day. So his vibe was sort of like, oh, heavy. And let's say that I had a great day and met a new client and was inspired. I would become the container for Clint's feelings instead of like holding my vibration where it was and remaining in my joy. So that's inauthenticity, right? Because I always felt like he couldn't handle his feelings. So I needed to be the container for them. Therefore, I never shared my truth. Like I would never share that, hey, I had a really great day and I want to share with you. I would always take his temperature first and then adjust my temperature according to his. And that's complete inauthenticity. That's codependency. It's a lie.
And it's a way that you're filling your hole.
For sure. I had a need to fix.
Yeah.
Because it allowed me not to look within. Even you, like most of my friends, my inner circle, they have always said, Greta, you're so grounded. You've got it together. Like you're so confident. No, that was complete bullshit. It was a mask. It was a facade that I wore. I was too afraid to show up with my vulnerability. So I just helped everybody else's with theirs. In my groundedness, I denied myself the experience of being vulnerable with others. So I really wasn't grounded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's like if we don't get to the root, we keep filling our hole of emptiness with these things.
Yeah, with anything. I do have an addictive personality. And as Gabor Mate says, addiction doesn't have to be to a substance. It doesn't have to be to a drug. It can be a behavior. It can be anything that provides temporary relief, but has long-term consequences and that you cannot stop is an addiction.
Yes.
And we all have those.
But what I'm inspired by you is, and with the help of Dr. Shefali, is that by really shedding, getting rid of all the masks and honestly getting to the root. I mean, you never really get to the root. There's always a deeper root, but to attempt to get to the root is where the authenticity comes. That's where your relationship starts to soar and evolve into a whole deeper level.
For sure. Absolutely. Clint and I, when we were going through, this was years ago, like when our marriage first started to, feel struggle and our kids were sort of showing challenging behaviors, we did what most typical families do. We sought the help of a marriage therapist and we tried several. And for us, our experience was it seemed to escalate our problems because neither one of us felt safe in the container of this. And it wasn't due to the therapist, right? It was the safety within ourselves, the safety within our relationship with each other. We would go to therapy, but we wouldn't really share what was really going on because, you eventually have to leave the therapist's office and then what? Like if you're not speaking the truth and if you're not able to hold space for the other's feelings, what do you do when you leave the third party that's objective? It's very, very scary. So, we had tried multiple avenues that, quote unquote, traditional methods and avenues to fix what was broken in our relationship. And what we discovered through separating, like radically separating and having him do his work and me do my work was we needed to start telling each other in that moment, whatever moment we were experiencing, what we were feeling and like the truth, speaking the truth. So if, he showed up and was in a shitty mood, he needed to say like, ugh, I'm in a shitty mood. And then I would say, wow, I can see that you're in a shitty mood. I'm not in a shitty mood. I feel great. So if you're in a shitty mood, maybe you need to go take a nap. And it seems so simple, right? But we never had those types of exchanges because we never felt safe to say, like, who am I to have a voice? Who am I to, and he doesn't need to take it on. He doesn't need to fix it. I don't need to fix him. We just needed to learn that concept of holding space for somebody. I never really understood what that meant, which is kind of embarrassing considering I'm a therapist, but I never was able to embody that or actualize that in my own relationships. And just that technique of just saying what is in the moment has radically changed our dynamic as a couple.
People do this all the time. This is another example of being guarded or fake, where you just hold back. You think things and you don't share them.
Well, I think it's important to say, Tammy, like Brene Brown says that not everyone has earned the right to hear your story. So I think part of Clint and I learning to speak our truths was also learning the art of discernment. So because we are in this space, it doesn't mean like I go around now in my all of my relationships and I'm able to show up with this new found vulnerability and authenticity that I have with you or that I have with him. Like I have to really tap into myself in every moment, in every experience with others, and really learn and discern. Like, what can I say? Because I couldn't go to, my neighbors, for instance, are devout Catholics. And so I wouldn't necessarily just go and knock on their door and, let it flow how I feel about organized religion. That's discernment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's inauthenticity. That's knowing, like, who has earned the right to hear your truth? So this has all been such a long process for us, but I think that's the core of, the relationship struggle, which is universal.
Yeah, but you get what you give. So and it's another level thing. Like before, you were only able to give a certain level, and that's what your relationship reflected. But as you stripped the layers and as you each went separate and did your own separate work and really worked on yourselves, you were able to come back and give a much higher level of yourself. And so now your relationship has completely expanded.
It has, but we're having to go very slow and really honor where each of our three children are in their process. So the added element of the blended family makes it that much more complicated.
Absolutely. And Mashonda Tafrair's book, Blend, everybody should read that book. Oh my God. Even if you don't have a blended family, you can learn so much. Just how you show up in a relationship and dealing with all the ego stuff. They are being adults.
Absolutely. It's the most inspiring book I've read in recent time. It is what helped me get to the point where, and I remember, Tammy, you and I having the conversation, like I felt like my heart was completely closed off to Clint, but I knew I still loved him. And that book broke me open again and allowed me to just like ever so slightly see in him who he really was. And that's what really started us down this process. So I'm so grateful to her. And I encourage everybody to read.
Yeah, because she shows we can't sit there and complain about the other person. Like we all have to meet halfway. How are we going to be the person that we want them to be? And it's just ownership and responsibility. And it's just a beautiful book.
Well, it's ownership of your own shit. And I played the blame game. I know Clint played the blame game. I even projected blame onto our innocent child. And through times in our relationship, he projected his shit onto our older children. And that is like, I mean, if you can see yourself doing that and then take ownership, like, oh no, this isn't about you. It's never about the other. It's only ever about ourselves. The other just holds the mirror to us. We have to choose whether or not we're going to actually look at it. Look at the reflection, see yourself, see your own shit, own it. And you will level up. And Dr. Shefali talks about this a lot, about when you go through the awakening process and you go through self-discovery, and you can't not have a radical physical change in form. And I know, like Clint, when we separated, he was so overweight. When you looked in his eyes, he was dull in his eyes. He just looked unhealthy. And I remember the first time I saw him after we had been separated, and like no contact whatsoever for, 4 months. And so we had this experience when we decided to connect for the first time. We got married on the beach. That was always like our go-to spot to have big conversations, which now in hindsight, I realize they weren't really big conversations. They were very surface and never really got us anywhere. But We decided to meet at our spot. And I remember he was already there. And I remember walking towards him and we both like paused in front of each other. And I reached out my hand and I said, "Hi, I'm Greta. It's nice to meet you." And we had to like reintroduce ourselves to each other because we had both changed so radically.
I've completely seen that.
Through my whole process, you were always my biggest cheerleader and support, and always saying to me, "Greta, you can do so much better. There's so many wonderful people out there." And I always knew that Clint was better. He just wasn't ready to be that highest version of himself. He and I sprung forward. I can see how a lot of people would feel like that was a backwards step. But no, it was the biggest jump forward.
You are going forward. That's why it doesn't feel like a going backwards because it's like
Right,
you can't deny both of your growth.
Yeah, it's truly remarkable. And I don't even want to like give the idea that what we did is necessarily the way that everybody should try. Like I'm not advocating, go separate with your husband or anything like that, because it's not the way for everyone, but it is what we needed to do in order to get to what, how we started our conversation, the root of the root of the root of the pain that was causing the conflict in the relationship.
And it's always our own pain. It's never about the other person. You could never fix Clint. He can't fix you. You both had to just do your own fixing. And always it's an ongoing thing. It's like Groundhog Day. We're always like, oh, here we are again. We have to fill our hole.
Oh yeah. I mean, we're tested every day. We're throwing little tests, and it's funny to, we giggle about it all the time, to watch ourselves show up to challenges that, come up in our daily lives differently than we used to. And so we now talk about it. We never talked about it before, but it is funny to watch the growth happen. I mean, we still have, like I said, we still have so far to go, but at least now there's an open, honest communication about it. And we're both observant of it, and we're not owning the others. We are owning our own, talking about it with the other, and then, just really staying in this moment right now. So we are in this process, and we're so grateful for it all.
We're fed from society this idea that you're going to get married and you own this person and they're going to complete your other half, and you're a half, you're not a whole. And then it's such a disappointment when you marry somebody and then you're like, what? You didn't fix me. So I feel like life is more like it's a flowing river, and then we like pitch a tent with somebody, and sadly life is impermanent and it comes crashing down and the river keeps flowing. And so we have to be able to operate on our own and know that we have to fill our own holes, fix ourselves,
and flow, and just flow.
Yeah, and enjoy, and not the attachment that always comes from the lack. So when we are full, we can come from a place of abundance, and that's where you can manifest great things together.
Yes. What a way to end this conversation. I'm so grateful for you.
Well, I love being on this journey with you.
Me too.
You make it so fun. Okay, we'll talk soon.
Okay, we'll continue to get leveled. Bye.
Now we're going to hear from Greta's husband, Clint. Hi, Clint.
Hey, Tammy. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
No worries.
You are my dear friend Greta's husband. And so like she explained, you have been separated for 3 years and you've both been doing your own separate personal work. And recently, Dr. Shefali asked you to be kind of a case study for her relationship course, Free to Be. You've been exposing your lives, and we're all learning so much from you. And I've just been so impressed with not only your growth, but your ability to take responsibility for things you've done.
Right on. Thank you.
So we will get into the relationship part of it. But you did say we could talk about anything, and I kind of want to clear the air on something. I would love to start with our experience working together at Dr. Shefali's annual summit called Evolve. So the four of us, so my husband, Bryan, myself, you and Greta, all worked on the production team for that event. And not only were we working well together, but we were also transforming based on the content of Evolve.
Right.
You are such an amazing craftsman. And that's one of the things you did for Evolve was you built this huge puzzle where everybody like contributed in their own way on their own piece. And we put it all together. And I got to see your skill level and your quality of work. So after you and I talked about starting this side business, and we were going to call it Clint the Conscious Craftsman.
Right.
And so we had a planning meeting. You came over to our house. I remember just being blown away by your samples of this line that we were going to have. So I got you the first client, and then I was all excited to tell you about her, and I never heard from you. So this is something you and I have never talked about since, but tell me, like, what was going on?
Well, thanks for putting me on the spot and bringing it up now. But thank you for noticing my talent and appreciating it. I wasn't in a place of feeling good about myself at all. And to be sitting around in our planning meeting about the conscious craftsman idea, it was overwhelming. And I get this sense of, which I now recognize what it is, of feeling false, feeling phony about it. I think maybe a trigger word too there was like conscious. I was not conscious at that time. My wife, Greta, was doing all the work at that moment of our separation. And she was, trying to drag me along. I was picking up a little here and there, but I definitely wasn't in the place I am now. I think I felt really crappy about myself, to be honest. And I felt I was around other people that were working on themselves. And I felt, phony about it.
But meanwhile, we're all just trying to do our work, It's like a daily thing. You got to keep working it out. Yeah.
Definitely.
Because Greta had said, like, in the past, you would self-sabotage at times, which, I mean, we all self-sabotage in different ways,
Right.
So that happened. And I just remember being so sad. But now looking back, my ego was involved too, because I was all excited, like this was going to be a project for me and feed my hole in a way. But all along, because I remember being frustrated and saying to Greta, like, you can do so much better, which, by the way, I feel horrible saying that now. Okay, I'm sorry, because I don't feel like that now.
She could have, Credit to my wife. We would have glimpses of beauty in our relationship where we were both conscious and both very honest and trustworthy with each other. They were just glimpses. They weren't strung together for long periods of time. And she saw it in me, quite frankly, when I didn't see it in myself. We were separated and still seeing each other on good terms, every now and then. But credit to her, too, for she finally said, enough, we're not even going to see each other, which in her way was she was enabling my behavior of not working on myself.
Yeah, you needed that,
Oh, big time, big time. I look back on it now and it was the scariest, one of the saddest moments of my life. And I was confused and didn't know what to do. Looking back, it was the biggest blessing in my life. I finally had to look in the mirror and figure things out for myself.
So was that the turning point for you, is when she put that firm boundary down? Is that what ignited the real growth?
For sure. For sure.
So how did you find the courage to peek under the surface for yourself? Because most people are too scared to look at themselves honestly. It's hard to do that. And especially you've been through a lot in your life. So how did you find the courage? Because you could have gone either way. That could have made you spiral downhill.
Right. And I think, like you said, most people don't have the courage to look at themselves. But I also think most people in some moment in their life, when they were alone or thinking about something, they can look at themselves honestly and be like, man, this is effed up, or I'm messing up, or this or that, even if it's for a brief moment. I've had those moments throughout my life where I've looked within and glimpsed it, and it was just overwhelming. Like, yeah, things are messed up. Yeah, it's effed up. Yeah, my behavior's wrong, but it's this person's fault. Then you start assigning blame and excuses. But I definitely had little glimpses of that and kind of had this thing in my mind, like, yeah, I need to work on myself, but I can do it later. If I can say it like, working out. Yeah, I need to go to the gym, but I'll go Monday.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of that going on. And I think the separation of my wife and then the true separation of not even talking or seeing each other, that was my Monday to go work out.
And so how has that journey been for you? You got the courage to start looking within, but then what is it like to really have to face your demons?
Oh, it was scary as hell. I went to the beach and I sat there, ironically, the beach where my wife and I got married at. And I made a promise to myself to not lie to myself anymore. Like, my whole life I've been lying to myself, which compounds lies to others and just a very negative way of living. But I made this promise not to lie to myself about anything ever again for the rest of my life. And that made it safe to go ahead and tell the truth about this. Like, oh, you know what? You're drinking too much. You're not working out. You don't treat your children well. You lied to your wife. You cheated on your wife. Like, to own everything, to finally own everything, which I've never done in my life. It was always someone else's fault. Well, this person did this, or, I lost a job because that was a bad place to work anyway. I didn't want to work there. Or I wouldn't have yelled at my wife if she didn't do this. Or I wouldn't have punished my child if they didn't do this. It was always someone else's fault, never my ownership. So when I took ownership, everything literally started to change. You could see things a lot clearer for what they actually were.
Yeah, and you can feel that from you.
Oh, yeah.
It feels so authentic. And now we're seeing it play out that way, which I think that's the really inspirational part, because not only are you exposing yourself for all of us to learn from, but we're seeing by you making the hard decisions and following the advice of Dr. Shefali and implementing it and really practicing it, things are changing for the better in a beautiful way. So it shows you that, if each of us just works on ourselves with our own holes, then when we come together in a relationship, it will naturally be a higher level of a relationship.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it started on the beach, making that promise not to lie to myself, but it wasn't like a magical thing. It was so hard and tough and scary, and still is. I'm still working on myself every day. And there was peaks and valleys throughout that, which were hyper scary. And what you realize too, when you finally start to make that change, is to become aware, to be conscious, is that I surrounded people in my life that were unconscious, So I didn't really have that many people to reach out to. All the people I knew who were actually conscious were my wife's friends, like Tammy Ramsay, who I reached out to. I wanted to be around someone conscious to talk to. And kudos to you for setting your boundary. I wasn't ready. I was still working on myself. And I reached out to Dr. Shefali, and she's like, good luck, Clint. I'm rooting for you. But luckily, my wife had all this material, books, podcasts. She pointed me in the right direction, and I went for it. And it's paying dividends in every aspect of my life right now.
It's so great because it works. If you get to the root of your pain, everyone has it on a different level, because that's the cancer. That's the roadblock in our relationships and at work.
Right. If you don't face the trauma that you've had in life and deal with it in a positive manner, you're going to be an alcoholic, a drug addict. You're going to overeat. You're going to have bad relationships. Your whole life is a wreck. And it's because of you're not facing the root problems that caused all this.
Yeah. And releasing it. It's like Amandeep talks about it as like food poisoning. Like you need to throw it up, but it makes sense. Sure. It's like get the toxins out and get separate from it.
Right. Another big thing I used to do was blame someone, but then hold on to that bad feeling or that bad experience and never release it. Always living in the past. I was definitely not living in the moment.
But I think the thing that is really hard to do in a relationship that I'm impressed with where you're at right now is we've been fed this idea that our spouse, they're going to complete us and they're going to make us happy. So we go to them for our happiness. And so their actions, everything they do, we take it personally and it's a reflection of us and our insecurities and all that. Given that you have been through a lot in your life, how are you allowing Greta to be free and being seemingly secure in that, where you guys are living your separate lives, but still together in a healthy way?
Well, first off, I was the most codependent person, and I had a very unhealthy attachment in all of my relationships. I remember a time when we were separated, when I first started to go on this journey, and I asked Greta to meet me because I wanted her input on some podcasts, some books, and she was reluctant. Credit to her, she did. And one of the things she left in parting was, Clint, we will never be together unless both of us are whole and can live without each other. And it was so scary to hear that. And that stuck in my mind. Like, we have to be able to be happy apart and comfortable with ourselves before we can ever even think about being together. There's also the beauty aspect of to be making it better and searching for something more. And it helps you not to be stagnant. Greta and I talk about everything now. We go on these trips together and we have these amazing experiences where before we'd be like, oh, let's just stay in this weekend. Let's do this or let's do that. Our relationship now is so revitalized and amazing that I'm like, no words
Yeah.
for it, obviously.
Yeah. And don't you think that it can be confusing as to what the work really is and how to go about actually identifying and healing your wounds? So a few years ago, my husband and I signed up for one of Dr. Shefali's courses called The Year of the Awakened Heart. And we signed up for it thinking that we were going to become better parents. But what really happened is we developed a much healthier, closer marriage. And that was because the class was all about healing your wounds. And so inadvertently, as we were both healing our own wounds, by the end of that year, we became so much closer. And so it was such a pleasant surprise. And it showed us the importance of really doing your own work and taking responsibility for your own stuff. So that is one option for people who are looking to start, like how do you identify and even start digging? It can be overwhelming.
That's part of the scary part of doing the work was each section or each new thing I would learn, I would feel confident about, and I would work on it like for a week or two and feel amazed. And then the very next subject or very next week's course, it would like knock me down like, oh my God, you're not ready. Oh my God, this isn't happening.
2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Right, totally.
Yeah. And then I remember in the beginning when I started this work, I was like, these conscious people and Dr. Shefali and everyone, they're all perfect, everything.
Oh,
so,
for sure.
And then I felt like so much pressure. But then when everyone just takes their masks off, everyone's just trying to do their best. And it's really always a daily thing. You never achieve the perfection. Every day, it's like the muscle working out that you just keep trying to fill these holes in a healthy way.
Yeah, that's a huge recognition. And it's a non-judging thing. Not only other people, but not yourself. Just be the best you every day and work on yourself every day. And for me, to be honest with myself every day. And everything flows when I do that.
Because you don't have the worry of, I'm being like phony, like I have to be on. It's exhausting to be on. I mean, we have to do a little bit to play the game of life. Like there is a level of that. But it's so great to have people where you can just be completely raw and real with.
Oh, for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Clint. And I am so excited to evolve together even more.
Yes, I can't wait. Okay, take care.
Bye. It's hopeful to know that we can actually improve our relationships by putting effort, energy, and some radical authenticity. We can really take our relationships to the next level. So thanks for listening. Bye.